I arrived on a night shift and I was the only nurse there in gynae ward for 24 patients. There was nobody else there. I've had friends who've not been able to leave their shift and have had to stay for well over because nobody's been able to come and take over from them. If nobody's coming on, if you're if you're racing and nobody can pass the baton, what you might do, you just carry on running until you fall. It's mental.
The money's there, they just do not want to pay it because they hate the NHS, because it stands for all the things that they do not believe in. Solidarity, collective, you get what you need and you pay what you can for it, to each according to their need, free at the point of need, etc., etc. That's complete anathema to the Tories. I hate it, absolutely hate it.
I was looking at pictures the other day of me on shift when I was nearly qualified and I was just crying constantly. You'd go to work crying and you'd leave crying. I'd work, Emma will tell you, I cried all day. Would go to the bathroom and cry, come back to the ward, cry. Because you couldn't do it. And that's not me, that's that environment that made me like that.
The function of the NHS at the moment is reliant on the goodwill of the people who work for it to do that little bit extra, staying late, missing lunch breaks, carrying huge caseloads. It is literally in total crisis, and if it wasn't for the goodwill of people who work for it, then it would collapse.
So you came off the night shift and you're out here?
Yes.
Straight from it. How long were you working?
12 and a half hours.
I know people in the trust who work back-to-back shifts to make enough money to be able to pay their rent, who are getting food vouchers, who are receiving hardship fund payments from the trust because their nurse's salary is not enough to pay their rent, to live, to look after their children.
We are really hurt because we are struggling. We are working so hard, long hours. The only thing that we get is the claps. So this has been ongoing.
We are constantly on Amber Alert, which means that we're this close to running out of beds where we can have people in. So I go around the children's hospital every day as part of my role as a safeguarding nurse, and I walk in through A&E where they've put up tents for people to stand under, because from 10 in the morning there's a queue coming out of the doors of the emergency department, down the steps, sometimes all along the front of the hospital, and that is on a daily basis.
I mean, I've been a nurse nearly 30 years. It's probably the worst I think I've ever seen it. I have, yeah. It's good face cream.
The air feels thick when you work in those environments. And I left after a year and a half qualified wards to go and work in a clinic at Guy's because I couldn't do it anymore. And that's not something that you'd normally do. You'd stay in the wards, you'd work away, you'd skill up, but I was making myself ill. Couldn't do it.
Mentally and physically?
Yeah, both, yeah. Would cry. I was looking at pictures the other day of me on shift when I was nearly qualified and I was just crying constantly. You'd go to work crying and you'd leave crying. I'd work, Emma will tell you, I cried all day. Would go to the bathroom and cry, come back to the ward, cry. Because you couldn't do it. And that's not me, that's that environment that made me like that.
I mean, this strike, it's not just about pay, it is about pay. MPs vote themselves a high percentage inflation busting pay rise every time they have a debate about it.
Everybody's overworked, understaffed. You find one nurse looking after 10, 12 patients on a long day shift or on a night shift. You don't get to know your patient because you're exhausted. It's really too much and overwhelming.
And this is happening, 100 metres from Parliament?
100 metres from Parliament, just over the road. It's safe to say that while they sit there, the ranks of the millionaires on the benches of Parliament deciding that it's unaffordable to pay nurses a decent salary while they go home to their mansions or decide to go on holiday on their yacht. It's just sickening. And it's absolutely symbolic of what's really going on.
Why did you feel it was important for you to come down here today?
Because we've reached the limit. The RCN has reached the limit. I'm still a member. I'm a retired member. And what we need to do is something very quick to improve the situation in the health service. Now, there are very long-standing problems. The government has ignored the staffing and has been cutting money for training for years and years and years. But now we're at crisis point. A lot of things need doing, but the one thing that they could do now would be to give a pay rise. And one of the most important reasons for that is, apart from nurses, particularly in London, can't afford to live, is because we need to retain experienced staff. If we train people, they need, and I can speak from experience myself, they need people who will support them, otherwise they'll walk out the door as well. But the experienced staff are walking out the door, and they would stay. I'm sure more people would stay, so we wouldn't lose people at such a terrible rate if they got decent pay, recognition, and also the other thing is, if we won this, morale would be boosted, and morale is the one thing, one of many things that we are short of. People are leaving because they can't afford it, but also because they're absolutely fed up. And it's entirely up to the government. They're having to be dragged kicking and screaming to the negotiating table. And hopefully something like this will persuade them that it's in their interests, because that's the only thing they'll do it for, is to be self-interested in what's going on.
The time since I've been here, since 7:30 this morning, and during the day, groups of nurses have come off on shift and come down to join the picket line. They're all wearing their kind of supporting the strike by working badges if they're in a derogated service. So there's just massive solidarity, which is really amazing. And I think that we haven't been used to that, and it's really good for everybody to get that feeling that, we are all in this together as nurses, maybe not with the people sitting over the bridge there, but...
We're about 100 metres from Parliament. If you took a member of Parliament around one of these hospitals on shift with you, what do you think they would see?
I think they'll come out ashamed, because they will see the amount of patients which are there, and then the staffing levels. You will find out the whole ward with 28 bedded patients, it's only 3 nurses on that ward, and in that ward you have different types of patients with different needs. So 3 nurses can't do all that alone. They need support. If we are fully staffed, like for example, maybe a ratio of 4 patients to 1 nurse, you'll be able to talk to your patient, you'll be able to understand the needs of your patient. But if you have 12 patients, 10 patients, at the end of the day you are exhausted. Your patient didn't receive that kind of care they needed from you as a nurse, because when they come in hospital, they expect us to care for them.
I'd want to show them the expectations. I'd want to show them the humour that we have in there. The nurses you work alongside are fantastic. I've met friends for life. I've worked with people that I'm so proud to know. I'd want them to see that side of it. I'd want them to see how unwell people are, and this isn't minor, this is major. If I don't do a certain thing, then people can become very unwell and die. The extremes that it can go to, and I'd want them to believe us. That's what I'd want. So hopefully they would. But and they can afford it. It's a political choice. There's all sorts of money they could get hold of to pay people more.
What do you mean by it's a political choice? What do you think what does that mean?
Well, what it means is there was no contest, for example, about giving money for weapons for Ukraine, which I entirely support. The money was found for that. The money was found to bail out the bankers. There's all the non-dom status people who, I don't know if this is true, but the Labour Party says would I'm not a member of the Labour Party, by the way, but would pay for the money is available. Think of all the money they wasted on PPE, the millions of pounds they wasted on PPE, and nobody's said, oh well, I think we should get that money back. There are plenty of other places they could. In the long run, we're going to have to tax people more, but we need to reform the tax system so that the people who can afford it can pay more. And also, it's not just income tax; it's wealth tax. They could be taxing wealthy people far more. The money's there; they just do not want to pay it because they hate the NHS, because it stands for all the things that they do not believe in: solidarity, collective. You get what you need and you pay what you can for it, to each according to their need, free at the point of need, etc., etc. That's complete anathema to the Tories. I hate it, absolutely hate it.